Hi there, welcome along to Transfer Talk. 2 weeks left in the transfer window and so much can happen. Abira Eze's Crystal Palace future is in the balance. Will he leave this summer? Jadon Sancho is free to leave Manchester United, but he won't be going to Roma. Plus, does Ruben Amorim need to sign a new goalkeeper?
It's a glaring issue for United that can't be ignored, and that is that they do need to find a goalkeeper. They have to. I'm absolutely unequivocal on that.
Also on the way, Christopher Nkunku can leave Chelsea this summer, but a European giant's attempt to sign him has failed. And it's a third new signing in as many days for Nottingham Forest as they bring in Arno Kalimuendu from Rennes. A very good afternoon to you, wherever you're watching us this afternoon, to European football expert Kevin Hatchard and to Mark McAdam. One place to start, that's Manchester United forward Jadon Sancho. He's unlikely to join AS Roma. Roma had made a bid worth £20 million for Sancho, and he spoke to the Italian club, but he's decided to explore other options. Mark, what further details do we have at this stage?
Well, personal terms weren't a problem, but going to Rome clearly was a problem for Jadon Sancho. We know that bid was lodged last week and the conversation continued between Manchester United and Roma. We know that Jadon Sancho is one of those players that's available and is being courted by a number of sides in Europe. The offer from Roma, like you say, was £20 million, which was around what Manchester United were looking for. I think maybe a little bit more would have been a guarantee to make that deal happen as far as the clubs were concerned. But clearly, being on £300,000 a week and living in Rome wasn't something that Jadon Sancho was interested in. I went to Rome last year. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, coffee and ice cream. Who doesn't want that? So the talks now will centre around other opportunities for Jadon Sancho. We know that, what Manchester United are looking for. Clearly, Jadon Sancho has a preference or a plan in his mind. We know that there's that constant link that's existed between Borussia Dortmund and the player. He joined from Borussia to Manchester United, went back there on loan and got to the Champions League final. Could he be going back for a third time, or is there another potential club waiting in the wings to strike now that they know this Roma deal is not happening? The fact that he's turned down the opportunity would suggest he's being told by his people, don't worry about Roma because this club is the one that are going to come next. I don't know. What
do you think happens here, Kev? Because I think Manchester United will be fairly gutted, though, because £20 million, a decent offer there. There's been lots of interest in Sancho in this window, but nothing concrete up until we got that bid in from Roma.
I think if he has passed up a move to Roma, I actually think he's missed a trick to start with, because he would have been able to work with Gianpiero Gasperini, who's an incredible coach. If you look at the kind of guys that Gasperini has really got a tune out of in the last few years, Sancho fits that mould. Josip Ilicic, Papu Gomez, these are guys that he took not one gear, several gears. So you look at those guys, you look at what he's done with Ademola Lookman. Not always an easy relationship between them, but he's got the absolute best out of Lookman. I think he could have done the same for Sancho. The Dortmund thing's complicated because the briefing in German media has been that they don't have a huge amount of money to play with necessarily, and they've been looking at younger options. They've been looking at guys like Carni Chukwuemeka, maybe another loan for him. They've been looking at Claudio Echeverri at Manchester City. Sancho, they've spoken about positively. Whether that translates into a move, we'll see.
So Sancho's one of a number of players United are open to moving on, including Rasmus Højlund. Mark, he wasn't in the squad yesterday for Manchester United. He was there at the stadium. Where do we stand on his future?
Yeah, this is another one that feels like now there's only one outcome, and that will be the departure of Rasmus Højlund from Manchester United. We know that AC Milan have been in communication with people at Old Trafford with regards to a loan and a possible option on that loan. However, Manchester United want to do a permanent deal. We understand they value the player around £40 million. Now, there has been a sort of softening on his stance. Before, he was very much focused on getting into the Manchester United team, proving to people in Manchester that he was a good buy and he's a top player. However, as things have transcended over the course of pre-season, it's become very clear to the player that game time is going to be very limited, if any. Therefore, particularly when you look at the weekend where he's not involved at all in the matchday squad, he now needs to explore those options, AC Milan being an option. We know that there are other sides in Serie A that are interested in Rasmus Højlund. There was talks potentially about the option for him to go to Leipzig as a part of that Šeško deal, but that didn't materialise. But it feels like at the moment AC Milan are at the front of the queue with regards to any potential deal with Rasmus Højlund. But once again, because of that investment from United, they're going to have to get some strong numbers on the table. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So therefore, loans with obligations are going to be more crucial than options.
Does AC Milan feel like a good fit for Højlund? There's clearly a player there, despite the fact the stats over 2 seasons in the Premier League, 62 appearances, 14 goals, don't quite paint the picture of a player who clearly does have a lot of potential.
Well, he was successful in Serie A before with Atalanta under Gasperini again, underlining his quality as a coach. So that's a league in which he has thrived before. Milan need strikers, so you would think he would definitely get game time. The Leipzig one's interesting because they had a kind of long-held interest in him, but it looks like their replacement for Benjamin Šeško is Romulo, who's a Brazilian guy they've brought in from Turkish football, so that door may well have closed. Ili Taure, the sporting director of Milan, said publicly at the weekend that Højlund is on their list, so there does seem to be really strong interest there.
Just one thing as well that I think is important to point out is that whilst we say it looks like he's going to depart Manchester United, Ruben Amorim was asked at the weekend after their game with Arsenal about his future and what potentially might happen, and he said he has to fight for his place. We will see what's going to happen. Rasmus has the same characteristics as Benjamin Šeško, so sometimes we need to choose. So whilst he's not saying he's not involved, he said he's got to fight for his place. So it's interesting the manager's stance on that situation.
And United play with Mason Mount as a striker yesterday rather than having a natural option, Rasmus Højlund, even on the bench, which tells you a lot, I think. Anyway, a mixed start to the season for Ruben Amorim after he saw his side's encouraging performance against Arsenal undone by an error by his goalkeeper, Altay Bayındır, after he decided to leave out Andre Onana from the matchday squad, despite the fact he was fit. Gary Neville says the club must address this position in this window.
There's a glaring issue for United that can't be ignored, and that is that they do need to find a goalkeeper. They have to. I'm absolutely unequivocal on that. The two that you look at that are that were mentioned in the last few weeks is Martinez and Donnarumma, and the reason I say that those two would be good goalkeepers for Manchester United is not necessarily because I think they're the best goalkeepers in Europe or that they're amazing. I think they've got big personalities and characters. You've seen Donnarumma in a European final for Italy save those penalties. He looked like a giant. You've seen him play for PSG in huge games under pressure. You've seen Martinez play in World Cup finals and win a World Cup. So they've played under extreme pressure and they've got big personalities and characters, and they almost walk out with that arrogance and sort of dominance of a goalkeeper. And I think Manchester United, they need that. But I think they need to sort the goalkeeper out because they will continually concede goals and points, and it undermines what you're doing.
So Gary Neville making it crystal clear that he believes United need a new goalkeeper. Mark, will they sign one?
Well, they'll certainly be hoping that they get a new goalkeeper in this window. Manchester United have to be a little bit conscious of what they spend. They haven't generated a huge amount of money so far this summer with regards to player sales. And that's going to be a big factor because they've actually spent quite significant sums of money, or best part of £200 million on the front three. So suddenly to go into the market for a goalkeeper, we know that Gigi Donnarumma is a player that's potentially available. Raw situation for PSG to let go someone who's been so critical to their success. 10 pieces of silverware whilst he's been at the football club. He's got 1 year left on his contract. We had Asmir Begovic on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he said, look, he's made for the Premier League. I know there's a lot said about his ability to play with the ball at his feet, but he's absolutely a top-class goalkeeper. He played with him at AC Milan. It feels like the Premier League is the destination of choice if there is a club that can get to the wage demands that the player has. And when you've got Gary Neville, who knows what it's like to play in front of a key goalkeeper at Manchester United and how crucial that position is, saying it's vital they go and get someone, you'd imagine that the hierarchy will be working behind the scenes to try and make it happen. But again, players out there, quality goalkeeper that they need that can do what Ruben Amorim wants. He seems to be very specific on his non-negotiables for players. Good players at Manchester United, if they don't fit into what Ruben Amorim wants, suddenly they don't look like good players and they're looking at the exit. So this is another situation, one to keep an eye on. There'll be one or two other players in the frame, and of course they had that big investment on Andre Onana. If they can't find a solution for him, if he doesn't play, then that is another problem that they need to address. So there's a few things that need to happen at Manchester United.
Kevin, is Onana good enough to be United's number one, or have we seen enough over the course of the last 2 seasons that he isn't at the level required for what United hope to be a squad that competes the Premier League and Champions League over the course of the next few years?
He's made a lot of mistakes, there's no doubt about that. I must admit I am surprised by how it's gone for him, in the sense that when you looked at what he was doing for Inter, he was a big part of them getting to that Champions League final. He played very well in that Champions League final.
His distribution was so good at Inter, but we've not seen that at all at United.
That's the problem. He's gone into a situation at United, like many players have, hasn't been an environment where he can play his best football. He's clearly had a knock to his confidence. In many ways, it's a similar situation to Højlund. Went there with a good reputation, hasn't been able to perform, has clearly lost the confidence. And when you're at United, which is one of the biggest clubs in the world, every mistake you make is hugely magnified. So I still think there's a top performer in there, but I can understand with all of the mistakes that he's made, why United might look elsewhere. Whether Donnarumma is that fit is another matter entirely. It's clear he's surplus to requirements. His future at PSG is non-existent now. Once Luis Enrique makes a decision, that's it. And they brought in Lucas Chevalier from Lille. He's the absolute number one. So it's about Donnarumma finding a new club between now and the end of the summer.
And in terms of finding the right club, do you think that United would be the right fit? Or looking at the Premier League clubs out there potentially looking for keepers, is there somewhere else that you think he may end up?
I was stunned to see him linked with Manchester City, in the sense that, as Marcus said, technically he's not amazing with the ball at his feet. I wonder whether somebody like Pep Guardiola looks at that and thinks, well, actually, I can improve that. I can train that up. I can actually change it. He is commanding. He was incredible in the closing stages of the Champions League. Without his performances, they don't come through those really tight games in the Champions League. And we're not talking about PSG as European champions. And, as Mark said, delivered in the European Championship final for Italy as well. It's only mid-20s.
26.
26.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who's been doing it since he was a teenager, hugely experienced. So, yes, a top goalkeeper, but also a keeper that does make mistakes from time to time as well. So are we going to be back on the wheel? He makes a few mistakes at Old Trafford, they get magnified, and we all start again.
It's fascinating because he is only 26 years old, and I think most goalkeepers, but when do they get into their prime? What, 28, 30?
Van der Sar was probably 35 when he was at his best.
Exactly, yeah. So, there's still a long way to go in his journey. And like you rightly say, if Pep can just get that ability with his feet into his game, then he's unstoppable.
There's room for improvement, not just technically, but I think for such a big man, he's not always as commanding as he could be at set plays. PSG have conceded a lot of goals from set plays over the past couple of seasons. He has made some mistakes with routine shots he should have saved, but I do wonder whether he's one of those goalkeepers that actually, the bigger the occasion, the bigger the performance, maybe loses concentration a bit in the more run-of-the-mill games, but he's a top performer when he needs to be.
It's going to be fascinating to see where he ends up. There's plenty going on. Let's get to another big story. Crystal Palace want to line up a replacement before considering selling Eber Eze to Tottenham. Among their targets for a new number 10 are Club Brugge's Christoph Sulis and Leicester's Bilal El Khanous. Negotiations are continuing between Spurs and Palace over a potential deal for Eze, who started in yesterday's goalless draw at Chelsea. Let's remind you what Oliver Glasner had to say about Eze yesterday.
Don't always believe what you read, especially in the internet. And here is the same, who tells you, who knows that this is the truth, what is written? There are rumors and so many rumors, and everybody tells somebody something for his own advantage maybe. But I also know we have 2 weeks to go, and I know Ebb's clause is gone, so it's the club's decision, and we will see what happens.
Mark, what do you think we learnt based on the fact that Eze started yesterday and scored the goal which was cruelly ruled out?
Well, I think the two things that you notice, first of all, is that Crystal Palace don't really have a desire to sell, and that any potential transfer is not close, because if it's close, he doesn't play. particularly when you're talking the types of numbers that will be associated with Eze. And I think it's a real indication of Eberechi's attitude. Now, we've seen this summer some players, when they're close to a transfer or they want to engineer a transfer, say, no, I'm not playing, I'm not involved, and they go and do their own thing. Whereas he's clearly with the group, he's training, focusing on Crystal Palace despite all of that noise and potentially a huge move on the horizon. I think that's what it says a lot about his characteristics and personality. I would love to be a fly on the wall in this particular transfer negotiation. Daniel Levy on the Spurs side, Steve Parish on the Palace side, two of the most fierce negotiators in Premier League football, going toe-to-toe for a potential deal. Now, as Oliver Glasner said, the release clause has expired. Now, ultimately, it doesn't mean a great deal. What it means is the player can go for the price that's agreed in the contract, and there's nothing that Crystal Palace can do about it. Normally, those release clauses are quite strict with the payment terms. So it might be, 20 million on day one, 20 million after 6 months, 20 million after 12 months, plus some add-ons. That's it. Whereas when you do the negotiation, they will try and say, well, we'll give you a little bit more up front, but we'll spread it over a longer period of time. In their accounts, they'll amortise it anyway for 5 years. So this is where the conversation is going to start, I guess, Monday morning to today. Those negotiations between the two clubs will happen. It feels like there's only one direction of travel here. It feels like that Eberechi Eze will become a Tottenham player by the end of this transfer window. But of course, Crystal Palace won't lose him without someone in the building, and that's key. They will not let one of their star players go without having someone lined up. The same with Alexander Isak. They will not sell these players because they're so important to that first 11 without having players signed up and ready to rock and roll.
When you look at the way that Eze has handled himself this summer, Mark Gay you can throw into the mix there as well. There's something to admire about that compared to what we've maybe seen with the likes of Johan Wissa and Alexander Isak. And that's surely got to be something that interested clubs will take note of as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it speaks to the culture that Oliver Glasner's created as well. I think they're an ambitious club now, they feel. They've obviously won that FA Cup. They've qualified for Europe. I do think they've got a decent chance of winning that Conference League if they can get the squad together. I think they can. I genuinely think you look at what Glasner's done. He's won the FA Cup, he's won the Europa League with Frankfurt. But Glasner's a really interesting part of this, I think, because if you look at his history, when he was at Wolfsburg, he spoke quite openly about the fact he didn't feel enough was being done to reinforce the squad. When he was at Eintracht Frankfurt, it was exactly the same. He was quite public in trying to drive the club forward to bring players in. He's not going to be happy to lose star players and not have them replaced.
And he's got credit in the bank as well, isn't he? If Oliver Glasner, who's just won the FA Cup and been so successful, could have gone to Bayern Munich not that long ago, is saying, we need reinforcements, we need to do more, we need to bring more into the team. If that's not a beacon of noise for the hierarchy to say, look, we've got a top-class manager here who says this, we need to back him, we need to support him because we're in a fantastic position. And it's a very well-run football club. Steve Parish has done an incredible job. There are so many good people associated and their recruitment has been outstanding. But you feel like that black cloud of which European footballer they're going to have this season, now that it's been sorted, they really need to step their foot on the gas.
It's been a really quiet summer in terms of incoming. Just 2 players signed so far, a backup goalkeeper and Borna Sosa, a left-back. In terms of the 2 players we've mentioned as potential replacements for Eze, Solis and El Khanous, are they 2 signings that could excite Crystal Palace fans? It's hard to step into the shoes of Eze because he's been unbelievable.
Really difficult. And with El Khanous, I think he maybe moved a bit too early. He moved to a Leicester team that was totally in flux, that was really struggling. We've not seen the best of him. Solis is interesting. He's been in England before with Norwich, so he's played in English football before. He went to Fortuna Düsseldorf in the 2nd tier in Germany, did really, really well. They nearly got promoted with him there. Then he went to Club Brugge. It's difficult to tell. It's Belgian football. How translatable is that? But what I would say about Solis is that plays 10, drifts out to the left, can play in that wider role as well, but also actually looked really good in the Champions League at times. And Club Brugge were excellent in that competition last season. He was a big part of that.
OK, as mentioned, Eberechi Eze isn't the only player that Crystal Palace may lose. Mark Gay is the subject of interest from Liverpool, with talks continuing between the 2 clubs. The defender appeared to ignore his manager Oliver Glasner following the full-time whistle. Mark, where do we stand with this potential deal? Because Steve Parish would probably argue Liverpool didn't defend too well on Friday night. Palace were brilliant on Sunday. Up the fee just a little bit more.
Yeah, but this is another difficult deal to make happen because Mark Gay is the Crystal Palace captain, played 90 minutes at the weekend and kept a clean sheet away from home at the Bridge, and he was a part of that successful unit. You can see these images here, which I found fascinating watching with the team this morning, because this is the moment where Oliver Glasner is sort of appearing to try and communicate with Mark Gay, and he carries on walking down towards the tunnel, and you can see Glasner's reaction there. What does that say about their relationship? Was there a mix-up in communication? Because Mark Gay had clearly just been clapping the away fans and then he'd walked off towards the tunnel. So 1 year left on his deal. We know that there is interest from Liverpool. Does the player decide to hold fire and see what bigger options may be on the table this time next year? Or do Liverpool step up their pursuit because they are in need of centre-backs?
OK, there is loads still to come on Transfer Talk. Will Christopher Nkunku remain a Chelsea player this season? We'll discuss his future in just a few moments' time. Hi there, a quick transfer update to bring you now. Fulham have made it clear to Rodrigo Muniz they want him to stay at the club. Atlanta continue to push for a deal, and Muniz is understood to be open to the move as they can offer him Champions League football. Fulham have so far rejected Atlanta's bids and would want a replacement before considering a sale. He came off the bench to score a late equaliser in the 96th minute for Fulham at Brighton on Saturday. And in terms of replacements, at the same time, Fulham are also expected to resume talks with Shakhtar Donetsk over the signing of forward Kevin. Fulham have seen 2 bids rejected in this window. Let's get to Chelsea, because it was a disappointing start to their Premier League campaign, a 0-0 draw with Crystal Palace. They want to sign Alejandro Garnacho and Xavi Simons, but only if at least 2 first-team forwards leave before the transfer window closes. In terms of outgoings, Mark, what is the latest with Christopher Nkunku?
So this was a big deal over the course of the weekend. Bayern Munich have failed in an attempt to try and sign Christopher Nkunku. The deal that Munich were proposing was on loan, and that's not something that Chelsea are really interested in. Chelsea want a permanent deal and value the player around 50 million euros, which is around 43 million pounds. He currently has 4 years left on his contract. He's 27 years old, so slightly different to the type of profile of player that Chelsea have signed over the course of this summer. Of course, you'll know Kevin, having covered the Bundesliga. He was the 2022 Bundesliga Player of the Season. Outstanding. It was a huge part of what Chelsea did last season. France international, World Cup next summer, that may be on the players' thinking. But it's very clear that whilst there is interest from Bayern Munich, they need to change the type of offer from a loan to a permanent. Otherwise, this deal looks unlikely at this stage. So, yeah, they tried over the weekend. Didn't happen.
You get the sense that this may happen later on in the transfer window, a bit of compromise from all parties. Where would Nkunku fit in at Bayern Munich? Because they've got so many brilliant attacking players. We've not seen the best of Nkunku, or not even seen on the pitch the last 2 years, really. They've
got fewer than they had, Bayern, because Thomas Müller's left, Jamal Musiala's injured, Kingsley Coman's left, Leroy Sané has left. Harry Kane, after the Super Cup win at the weekend, said this is one of the smallest squads I've ever been a part of. Now, I've got some young players that want to bring through, guys like Lennart Karl, Tom Bischoff as well, who've brought in from Hoffenheim, but they definitely need somebody like Nkunku. The reason for that, he can cover the 10, he can cover the wider positions, he has played in that number 9 role as well. So he's somebody that really could be part of that fluid front 4. They're going to need a much bigger squad, I think, in terms of top-level options. The Bundesliga, I think they'll win. That's not the problem. The problem is, how do they get closer to winning the Champions League? You saw Xavi Simons, or Xavi as he likes to be known, in action in the flesh in the German Cup at the weekend. What would he offer that is different from what Chelsea have in their squad right now? Because maybe unlike Bayern Munich, they do have a number of different attacking options. Yeah, he's an interesting one because he's really creative. He does achieve things like that, but actually really positive, really looked engaged, part of the team, scored a goal, kept on going even though he had a bit of physical treatment as the game wore on, and certainly didn't seem to be saying farewell to the fans at the end. What was interesting is that Marcel Schäfer, the sporting director of Leipzig, said afterwards, you know that we let players go if it works in a sporting sense and an economic sense. At the moment, that is not the case. And if it continues to not be the case, he's still going to be a Leipzig player.
OK, a busy few days for Chelsea in terms of incomings and outgoings. We'll keep you right across that. But coming up next, Pep Guardiola wants to trim down his squad. So too does Mikel Arteta. We look at who could be out the door at City and Arsenal. Plus, Mark has an update on Ben Doak's future. Welcome back. Time now for our transfer update. Crystal Palace want to line up a replacement before considering selling Abira Eze to Tottenham. Among their targets are Club Brugge's Christos Solis and Leicester's Bilal El-Khanous. Mark Gay has a big decision to make about his future as Liverpool continue talks with Palace about signing the centre-back. Pep Guardiola said Ederson missed their opening win over Wolves because of illness amid speculation over his Man City future. Bayern Munich have failed with an attempt to sign Chelsea forward Christopher Nkunku on loan. Chelsea and Nkunku prefer a permanent move, and he is valued at £43 million this summer. Keith Andrews confirmed there has been no movement on Johan Wissa's future after he missed the defeat to Nottingham Forest. Newcastle United are also interested in Paris Saint-Germain striker Gonzalo Ramos amid the uncertainty of Alexander Isak's future. Arsenal, they're focused on sales, with Fenerbahce interested in left-back Alexander Zinchenko. Manchester United are unlikely to pursue a move for Brighton midfielder Carlos Baleba this summer, and Rasmus Højlund is yet to be convinced by AC Milan's proposal to sign him on loan from United. Don't forget, you can keep across all the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. You can scan the QR code which is on your screen right now. Bournemouth beaten by Liverpool on the opening day of the Premier League season. Plenty of encouraging signs, though. And Mark, they should be encouraged because it looks like they're set to make a signing.
Yeah, very close now to announcing this one. We understand that Ben Doak of Liverpool has completed the first part of his Bournemouth medical. The total package is worth £25 million. Spent a little bit of time on loan in the Championship last season. Joined Liverpool from Celtic. He's a pint-sized winger, but I really like him. Direct, pacey, technically very good. Always looked like a threat every single time I watched him. And I'm impressed by what Bournemouth have done. I know a lot of the narrative this summer has been players have been sold for huge prices. But you have to remember that Bill Foley, the owner, when he went into the football club, he injected around £250 million in the first two transfer windows, spent more again in the third transfer window. So they've actually had an outlay of about £300 million on top of spending money on the training ground and the stadium redevelopment. So it's not like there's someone that's gone in, just sold all the best players. They've actually generated huge sums of money from the investment they made initially. And their recruitment's been absolutely outstanding. They've really got everything spot on. So therefore, Ben Doak, another player to replace Luis Sinisterra, who's heading to Brazil on loan, I think could be a really exciting one. And Liverpool do have a buyback option on that as well. So I think that shows you how much they like the player, the fact that they say, well, yeah, we'll sell him, but he could be a superstar. OK, let's get to Manchester City because they put in an impressive display against Wolves, maybe a statement in their opening game of the season against Wolves. Pep Guardiola has been rebuilding his squad since January and has spent £160 million already this summer. But he says the current squad needs trimming. Mark, Ederson, Savinho, could they be two players to depart? Yeah, this is it's a fascinating situation here. There's been a lot of talk about Manchester City goalkeepers. There's been a constant noise about Ederson over the course of the last, 12 months or so as he gets closer to the end of his Manchester City contract, and whilst he's won everything whilst he's been there, then suddenly he looks at other options and thinks, right, it's now the time for a new challenge. He wasn't involved this weekend because of stomach problems, and the Manchester City doctors advised him to stay at home in Manchester whilst the club travelled to the Midlands. We know that Galatasaray have offered a deal which we understand to be around €10 million. Manchester City want the player to stay. There's no desire to sell someone of his experience at this stage. We know that Savinho wasn't involved over the course of this weekend as well. Noises around Rico Lewis and Claudio Echeverri as well. Sky in Italy suggesting that Dortmund are interested in him. So, yeah, whilst there has been a lot of recruitment in January and at the start of this summer, it feels like there's a lot of focus now on players that potentially could be leaving the Etihad.
We'll wait to see who starts in goal for Manchester City this weekend. Will it be James Trafford, who kept a clean sheet on Saturday, or if Ederson's fit again, if his stomach's all right, will he get the nod? One player who got the nod was Tijani Reinders, and he was incredible on Saturday.
Yeah, brilliant. No surprise. Does everything so well. He carries the ball incredibly well, scores goals. We saw that with Milan. He's not a defensively minded midfielder, but he can fill in the gaps. He can do all of that as well. And you can see why people are talking about him as the long-term replacement for Gundogan. And obviously he's in that team already. But he's got a lot of Gundogan about him in terms of he's multifunctional, he can do lots of different things. It's his composure as well that always strikes me. He went to Italian football, settled in like it was no problem at all. I think he's going to be a phenomenal signing for Manchester City.
And Ryan Cherky, we saw him come off the bench, make an impact. We see his skill set. Surprising not more clubs went in for him in the summer because City got him for a really good fee. What impact do you see him having this season? Because clearly minutes are always going to be an issue of Pep, especially when you consider the number of brilliant attacking players they have right now.
I'm sure there'll be requirements tactically that Pep will put on his shoulders. If he listens to those, if he's willing to go along with those, the sky's the limit for him. I think he is so talented technically. You don't want to necessarily smooth off too many of the rough edges.
Which maybe we saw with Jack Grealish.
Because you would lose a bit. Well, Grealish, I guess, was asked to do a very specific role and did it well because ultimately was a part of that treble-winning team, so has won a lot of City. But I think it was jarring for people because they'd seen him play a certain way for Villa. He was asked to do a totally different thing. But I think actually, if you look at Doku, for example, for City, I think a lot of people felt the same with him, that, well, there's this guy who wants to take people on, he's got all this one-on-one ability, is he going to have that coached out of him? Actually, no. I think what we've seen with him is that Guardiola says, go and do your thing, take people on, open up space for others. I hope that's what we'll see with Cherky because he's an unbelievable player. OK, like
Manchester City, Arsenal off and running in the Premier League after their win over Manchester United yesterday. Off the pitch, the club remain focused on sales before they consider whether having to go back into the market, if they can go back into the market. I know it's boring for Arsenal fans, Mark, but where do we stand in terms of outgoings? Do you think they can do enough in terms of outgoings to maybe spend some more?
Depends on the type of sales they make and the players that depart. I don't think there's some huge figures going to be attached to the potential sales, and Arsenal actually haven't really been one of those clubs that's been able to generate huge sums of money for player sales. You look at Liverpool, Manchester City, they've been exceptional at it, whereas sides like Manchester United and Arsenal have struggled. And you can see, you look at their first team departures this summer, they've only made £10 million, which for a club like Arsenal and the type of quality that they have within their squad, you'd expect that to be far greater than it currently is, a number of players going on free transfers. The players that potentially could be added to that list, Zinchenko, we know that Fenerbahce are interested and Arsenal are prepared to listen to suitable offers for Alexander. He has 1 year left on his contract, so it feels like now is the right time. Brilliant servant, really. Probably one of those players that's a victim of being having the ability to play in multiple positions, at left back, in midfield, on the left-hand side. We know that Fabio Vieira is another player that is potentially heading out of the Emirates. Stuttgart are in talks with Arsenal at the moment. He went on loan to Porto last season. He's got 2 years left on his contract, but again, significant investment, £35 million in the player. They're not going to get anywhere close to that, so therefore it's another one of those sales that doesn't really work financially. And we know that Fulham are currently still in talks with Arsenal with regards to Reece Nelson and a possible loan deal there. So yeah, some more players that could be added to that list, but not sizable in terms of fees, so therefore going back into the market to replace them might not be as simple.
I think the Fabio Vieira thing to Stuttgart makes a lot of sense. Enzo Mio's just left them to go to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia, so they need that kind of 10, somebody who can buzz around behind the strikers and really pull the strings and be creative. He would be a perfect fit, and I think with more space and time in the Bundesliga, we'd probably see the best of him.
Yeah, it feels like we've not seen the best of him at the Emirates. In terms of Victor Gyökeres, one of the new signings that came in, lots of hopes pinned on him. Mikel Arteta admitted that some of his signings aren't quite up to the top level yet. What did you make of his debut at Old Trafford?
It's going to take time. It's going to take service. It was a game where, obviously, Arsenal were trying to contain United, trying to control the game, weren't dominant in terms of the attacking part of the game. But I think he does have all the attributes that you need. He's got the physicality to cope with the Premier League. We've seen the shot volumes, we've seen the goal volumes have been unbelievable when he's been at Sporting. But also we've seen good performances in the Champions League. So I'm sure that will come. Zubimendi, I think, more encouraging because that was the kind of game that you need him to do his thing in. And what is his thing? Control, great passing, interceptions and tackles when he needs them, and generally just screening that defence. And what it will allow is it will allow Declan Rice to be more attacking in a lot of games. It will allow that freedom further forward. So I thought encouraging from him. He had a slice towards the end, which was a bit scary, but he got away with that. But generally very good.
OK, there's loads still to come this lunchtime on Transfer Talk. Kevin's going to tell you everything you need to know about Nottingham Forest's latest signing. He looks brilliant. And there's a new defender in at Sunderland as well. Stay with us. Hi there, welcome back. Leeds United are in advanced talks with AC Milan over the signing of Noah Okafor. The fee under discussion for the forward, who can play across the whole front line, is £13 million. Leeds have received encouragement. The player wants to join them, and Daniel Farke has been talking about them needing to make some attacking signings in this transfer window. Kevin, what do we know about him? It seems like quite a decent fee for somebody who can play across the front line.
Yeah, I think what that speaks to is the fact that he looked really good at Salzburg. He was a real rising star. As you say, can play through the middle, can play in a wide area as well. Went to Milan, it hasn't really happened for him. He's had lots of injury problems that have really set him back. And I don't think we've really seen the player that he can be. But the fact that he'd been linked with some big clubs in Italy, the fact that there is still that interest in him, I think speaks to the fact that people think there is a really good player in there still, but he's still got a lot to do to get to the level we expect.
OK, we'll wait to see if Leeds get that deal done. Now, it was a busy weekend on the pitch and a busy one off it with several Premier League deals completed. Kevin, Nordi Mukiele is now a Sunderland player. They've been beating this window. What will he bring? Because he wasn't getting minutes at PSG, was he?
Yeah, he brings experience. He's been at some big clubs. He was at Leipzig for a long time. He was at PSG. He was at Bayer Leverkusen last season, playing in big Champions League games. And he brings versatility as well. He can play centre-back, he can play wing-back, he can play right-back. So I think Sunderland have done some really interesting business in terms of the profiles, and he's one of the guys that could be in that leader category. So, yeah, I think that's a smart signing.
And Mark, Nottingham Forest have acted so quickly after finding out they'll be playing in the Europa League this season rather than the Conference League, and they've made a signing today as well.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference to the finances. The difference between what you earn playing in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League is worth a minimum of about £25 million, which is significant. You know, it's a player or two players or, you know, a whole chunk of wages. So therefore, I know Nuno was really frustrated this time last week where they hadn't got a lot of deals over the line. But suddenly, they've been active. They've got a number of really good quality players as well. I like what Ross Wilson has done whilst he's been at Nottingham Forest. They've done some exceptional business. You just look at what they achieved last season, and you'd have to say, again, they look like they're in a good space ahead of the new campaign, particularly off the back of the result at the weekend. And yeah, new players announced at half-time is always a good thing, isn't it? It's always a great opportunity for new players to just soak in the surroundings. I really like James McAtee, big fan of him, coming through that Manchester City academy. Amari Hutchinson tasted the Premier League last season at Ipswich as well, so he understands the level. And like you say, today, another player announced as well. And it was done by the social media team at Nottingham Forest when they announced Arno Kalimuendo. Here's what it looked like. It's coming.
Bonjour Reds, my name is Arno Kalimuendo. I'm here on Transide for a new history. And I'm ready to be with you, your Reds.
I'm very excited to see this man play in the Premier League. Gianni Leone, do you think we'll see him play much in the Premier League? Liverpool have just announced his signing, 18 years of age, but clearly huge potential.
Yeah, Liverpool were light in that area. We know that. We don't know what's going to happen with Mark Gay between now and the end of the window. But Leone's somebody that made his debut in Serie A, the third tier, at 16. He is 6'5", really imposing physically, but good on the ball as well. There were lots of big clubs in Italy who wanted to sign him, and Liverpool, I think, have stolen a march on them and have got a real transfer coup here.
OK, before we finish, we've got some other players to discuss that could be on the move. We've still got a few days left of this transfer window. Mark, what's going on with Facundo Buonanotte? Because he performed really well on loan at Leicester last year.
I thought he was outstanding. Really impressive player. When he gets on the ball, he can make things happen. He's got great vision, great passing ability, comfortable with the ball at his feet as well. And there's a number of clubs that are interested in him. I'm surprised that he's not one of those players that actually Brighton are saying, we want to keep a hold of you. But Brighton rarely make mistakes in the window. And they rarely let players go that they're not comfortable with letting go. But it appears that his days down on the south coast are coming to an end.
Kevin, when it comes to Erik ten Hag, I don't think he'll be hugely pleased with what's happened this summer in terms of outgoings. In terms of incomings, Victor Lindelof could be one that comes in.
Yeah, well, they need extra centre-backs because they're playing this 3 centre-back system that Erik ten Hag doesn't usually employ. Lindelof's somebody that obviously he knows well from his time at Old Trafford. And he's somebody who can come in on a free. It looks like quite a pragmatic deal to do.
And in terms of Carney Chukwuemeka at Chelsea, we understand Borussia Dortmund want to try to sign him again, but so far they've not been able to make a breakthrough.
Yeah, Chelsea are in that funny position this summer where they have to have a positive net spend. In other words, they need to sell more and make more money than the players that they bring into the football club. And I think a number of those sides that are interested in those Chelsea players will say, well, we know you have to sell, so we're just going to sit tight and wait for this to develop in a way that suits us, because Chelsea will have their price and, of course, the buying clubs will have their price. It's just a bit of a poker game. But with the window ebbing away, eventually there's going to have to be some sort of a break. Otherwise, Chelsea won't be able to go and sanction the purchases they want in Alejandro Garnacho and Xavi. So, therefore, the other teams are just saying, well, let's just wait and see, because their price might change in a few days' time when Chelsea become a little bit more keen to offload players.
Let's get to Spain. Marcus Rashford came on in the 69th minute for his Barcelona debut. Yes, they did manage to register him in time. Do you think in time that he will become a regular starter at Barca?
I think it's going to take him a while. I think if you look at Barca's best 11 at the moment, he's not in it. Rafinha's ahead of him in terms of the striking position. Lewandowski's ahead of him. And at the moment, Ferran Torres is ahead of him. And that's fair enough, because I thought Ferran Torres played very well last season, scored some big goals for them. But I think in general, they're very pleased with how Rashford's gone about his business. And in terms of PR, him saying that he was very comfortable about the registration thing really helped him. So he's made a good impression.
And finally, back to the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich were desperate to sign Luis Diaz this summer. They've got him in. He's already making an impact.
Yeah, he looked really good in the Super Cup at the weekend. They beat Stuttgart in that game, and he scored what turned out to be the winning goal, a header at the far post. And part of a really fluid front four, I think he's going to be a super signing for them. I really do.
Kevin, Mark, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on Transfer.
I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you want to play tough and want to hate this, I'll always show up.